All right, my clock shows 8. I'm not gonna start all the way. We'll give people a chance to get here if they're running a little behind. We'll start it up. Hi, if I haven't met you, I'm Kelly. I was a launch coder just like you last year. Now I work at Centene. I went through their Women Plus program. I did the same web dev course you're taking now. And then I followed it up with C# and then Liftoff. And they helped me into the position I'm in now. And I had so much fun throughout the program. And I miss teaching. So when they had this spot open up, I jumped right on it. So this is being recorded. We had some people who couldn't make it who asked that it be recorded. I would have just shared Carrie's recording because she's much better at this than me, but I actually ended up having to update the syntax because even though I took this last year and she made those practice assignments last year, the syntax has changed in that time. So I spent the last week doing some refactoring and getting it to match what you guys are going to need to do for the Mars rover. That's why I have to actually record myself tonight. Hit it. If you've got questions, please toss them in the chat. I will try to keep my eyes on it. Right here on the screen, what I've got is a breakdown of this assignment, step by step. We have 3 classes we'll be working with. It begins with some information about the classes and then a list of the tests that we'll be writing. And I've got it side by side with the same information from your Mars rover assignment so that you can see that we'll be doing the same sort of things. You will need to write a test that your command class correctly sets the command type. We will be checking that a name is correctly set. You need to have some errors thrown. We've got tests for that. Different arguments passed in. If there's default values, you've got tests like that over here, and we'll be practicing that. So I've tried to make sure that all the tests that we write tonight are going to be in some way tied to the type of test you'll need to write for your Mars rover. It's as close as I can get to helping without cheating. So if you don't already have this, I'm dropping it in the chat for you. There's our starter code. And just in case you want these checklists, because I love checklists, then I'll drop those there. All right. You should at least be able to view those. All right. So let's get right to it. I have numbered these files so you know which ones to do first as we go through. So first we're going to write tests for our item class. The first thing we need to do is make sure that it correctly instantiates the object from class when a name is passed in as an argument. So if it is given a name, does it correctly create this thing? We want to test that the name is put up. So what do we need to do? First, we need to have something to test. So we are going to create a new item and we are going to call it a notebook. And we are going to say that it is in the main compartment. This goes back to our specs. Each item has a name and a location. So we want to make sure that the correctly assigns name when we pass it in. I'm so nervous to talk right now. All right. So we have our new item, and what do we want it to do? We expect that if this works correctly, when we check what the item name is, it will equal notebook. That's what we just told it the name was. So if it does its job right, That's what's going to happen. Oh, and that beautiful, beautiful line of green dots, everybody's favorite thing. All right, so that one's done. Everybody's next favorite thing, checking things off lists. Now we need to make sure it's going to throw an error if there isn't a name. So, next test. It throws error if name is not passed into the constructor as an argument. So this time, we want a new item that doesn't have arguments. And here, I learned something. All right, so I started it just like I did the other one. I made a new item, and I made it with no parameters so that a name isn't there, right? And I said, I expect that, you know, having this new item over here, I expect that doing that will throw an error because I didn't give it a name. So I expect it to throw this error, name of item is required. And I see something here. I'm gonna go back. Expect a new item with no parameters to throw an error that says the name of the item is required. But then I came up against this. And I had to spend some time on Google. And what I learned is that for these, when we're doing throwing errors, it wants that to be wrapped in a function. So this part here, it wanted it to be a function. So some of you, I think, have been learning about fat arrow functions from some of your TAs. It is kind of the way the industry is moving. So we open our fat arrow function with the parameters. This is a no parameter function. This is the fat arrow part. It says with these parameters, we want to do this. And this is what would normally be within your braces of your function. So we're going to put that new item information. We're saying if we have a new item with no parameters, then we want it to throw this error. Thank you. Let's go. This right here is that arrow function. There's no parameters. The function is that we want to create a new item. And when we create a new item with no parameters, then it throws the error, the name of the item is required. And then that one passes. Now, the nice thing about test 1 and test 2 here is that if you have done those, the next ones are really easy because they're the same. Because we're going to check location, and then we're going to check that same error. So we will create our same item. New item is our notebook. And it's still in the main compartment. And then we expect that the item location, if everything works the way we're hoping it to, we expect it to equal main compartment. Uh-oh. Undefined. What saved you a lot of time? The fat arrow? Max, did I save you? All right, so this says that we don't have that. So we're going to use test-driven development to realize that we don't have a location property here, which means that we need to add a location property. So let's do it. Oh, not inside that if loop though. Don't do it in there, it won't work. So this location equals location, but that's not good enough. Oh, good, it's already up there. If it wasn't in the parameters, we would have to make sure we added it to the parameters too. Otherwise, it wouldn't be pulled in no matter what we did. Right, so now we've got that. And that test passed. It failed because initially we didn't have a location property at all. We added the location property and now it works. So before we even write this one, throws error if location is not passed in. Since we just looked at this, we know that there isn't any error handling written for the location. So we can go ahead, and I like to always work smarter, not harder. If there's no location, use the same logic, just change name to location. And I just like to always run it when I know my test passed because it makes me feel good about myself. I like the green dots. A little pat on the back. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to copy this test and bring it down here and just change it to location. But it through name function is required. Item class there's error if location is not submitted constructors. Expected function to throw error location of item is required, but it threw error name of item is required. Well, isn't that interesting? Didn't do this before. Isn't that the fun stuff? Ah, and we need if it's null, if there isn't one. If it's not null, because they can say that there's no location on it. So we're going to say, and if location is not null. Does that make you happy? Hmm? No. This is where I like to, Max can tell you, I start over a lot. All right. Then we have this function. And no location. That's why I don't like recording myself. All right, so that looks right. So let's check the test again. I know. Anybody got any ideas? Oh, look at you. Smart, Richard. Yes, that's what it was. Is that it got to the name, it threw the name error before it could get to the location because I didn't put a name in here. So we'll call it a notebook, but there's no location. There we go. Good catch, Rich. Found it right before I did. All right, so let's check our list. That's all of our item class tests done. Any questions about that? How to check that something is set correctly or how to check that it's throwing an error. I will be sending you the solution replit when we're done so that you can have access to those fat arrow functions for error throwing. Yeah, that one took some Googling. All right. Now, we want to make sure, and this is where I think your rover class has some default values that are set. And so this is testing default values. So we are going to create a new backpack called my backpack. And we're not going to give it any parameters. And let's check what those defaults are. Main is an empty array, front pocket is an empty array, side pocket is null. So we want to make sure that the main property is set to an empty array. So if we do that with no parameters, then we can expect that my backpack dot main will empty array. Ta-da! It did. So basically, to break down our test structure again, and this like speaks to my teacher soul so much, you set up an expectation. If it works right, it's going to do this. This is what we need it to do. Then you create an instance of that thing that you want to test, and you say, this part should be this. If it's true, then you pass. And it's really nice. Like, it just works with my brain. I don't know. Like, if this can set the side pocket correctly, then I know that that part of my code works. And it's just as simple as saying, this should be the answer. Is that what the code did? So next, we want to make sure that we can get that side pocket to be null. So we're going to do the same creation of a backpack. Right now, I'm wondering if it would have been better just to create an empty new backpack outside of all of it. But then right after I wondered that, I thought, no, because the types of backpacks I'm going to create for these tests are going to be too different to make a global variable useful. Just in case you wonder how my thought process works, that's all I'm doing. Like I said, I was right where you are 1 year ago. I had never written any code, so out loud is still a very big part of what I do. So we want to make sure that our side pocket is equal null if we don't give it any parameters, because that was the default value it gave us, and we're still passing. All right, now we want to test that the new backpack with arguments sets the properties correctly. So I'm going to copy over some items in the backpack, so you don't have to watch me type them. So here we've got 4 items. We've got a textbook, pencil, water bottle, spiral notebook. We've got an array of 2 of those items in the main compartment, 1 in the front pocket, and then the water bottle is in the side pocket. So we want to check that these things are correctly set. Now, we could write a bunch of separate tests where expect backpack main to equal this, expect backpack side pocket to equal this, and you could do line by line by line. But you can also store your tests in arrays. So you could say expect and then have an array of things that you want to check, so long as the two equal has a matching array of what it should equal. So that's what we're going to do here. Kind of more, I don't know, compressed. You might prefer to write them all out line by line so it's easier to read and understand, but I wanted to show you that this is possible. So here we're going to check that my backpack main the second item in that array, that the name of it is one of the things we're going to check. Then we also want to check the first thing in the front pocket. And since these properties are arrays, you have to use your index bracket notation to call those. We want to check that name. And then we also want to check the side pocket item. We don't need a bracket notation there because it is just one item. Now that we have those three things we want to test, we want them to be equal to, let's see, my backpack main, the index 1 is item 4, so that should be spiral notebook. Next answer, front pocket index 0 is item 2, that's a pencil. And then his side pocket is item 3, that's a water bottle. Not a boodle, a bottle. So you see how we have this is expected to equal this. This part here is expected to equal this. And this part equals water bottle, if our code is written correctly. Now, the purpose of doing this right here, over doing it line by line, is line by line, you would have had 3 lines of code, and this is 1. All right. I forgot to wrap this in an array. There we go. So you have an array of questions with an array of answers. You can do them all at once. All right. Now, we want to test a method. Other thing that our program needs to do is it needs to be able to add items to the backpack. So we will need an item. This I'm just going to copy them because it's easier. So we're going to have 2 items. We're going to have one that's already in there. No, we're going to have an empty backpack. My backpack. And then we're going to take our backpack. We're going to add 2 backpack and 1. And then we're going to add both of them just to make sure everything works great. They're killing me. And then now that we've got our test scenario set up, we want to tell it what we need to check. So now we have a backpack. We've tried to push 2 items into that backpack. Let's check on them. So we're going to expect, and I'm going to do this array again. We're going to expect that my backpack main first item in that array name. And then we're gonna check the front pocket as well. You don't want to know how many times I went back because of spelling errors or like wrong capitalization or some crap. Oh, it drove me crazy. All right, so we've got that and we want it to equal. And we need this to be an array of answers to go with our array of questions. And there should be a textbook in the main compartment and a pencil in the front pocket. Except, oh no, there's no add to backpack method written yet. So we know that currently we can't add anything to our backpack. And so we need to, do you have a question, Richard?
Yeah, I was, am I on or?
Yeah, you're on now. Sorry.
Am I on?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Am I on? I'm sorry. I was having mic issues.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I was, I was working on the one that's upcoming, and I guess I'm confused why sometimes you can test it, but you don't have to write code on the other side, to check that it's working. Is that true? Like, I'm seeing that in your examples that,
well,
like, it's only.
It's like part of it was already written, like this part right
Oh,
here.
right.
This
It was drawing
there.
upon
That's why
that.
I didn't have to write that.
Okay. Okay.
This test failed because this method hasn't been written yet.
Okay. So
and
you
so
always
sometimes you're testing code that has been written, but then we move into using test-driven development to create new code now.
And then what I was wondering is, like, how you can change it on either side. You can change it on the test side, or you can change it on the code side to throw it to be false.
Mm-hmm.
Is either one an okay way to test it, or should you test it in both, like, environments or whatever to see how it works?
I would say either way, but I would also say you should ask more experienced developers than me, because that's always what I say.
I get that, but yeah, okay. I mean, I was just trying to.
Oh, no worries.
Seems like sometimes when I wrote stuff and some of the code was already there, yeah, okay, it seems to work. I don't shouldn't have to throw an error or make it fail. I think it's fine. Okay, good.
I don't always prove, like, I don't prove it false and true. Like, I don't give it a correct thing and then a wrong thing, unless I'm checking that it will throw an error if it's given the wrong thing.
That makes good sense. Okay, good. Thank you.
No problem. I'm sorry I didn't see your question sooner. I'm cheating off my solution, so my brain parts don't slow us down. All right, so we need to now write a method that will add an item to the backpack. So let's think through this. Each item is going to have a name and a location. Based on its location, we need to push it into that compartment of the backpack. Okay, so if item location equals, we want to do what? We want to take this front pocket and we want to push, this item into that array. Else, this is my C# else, sorry. JavaScript, like the else's go up on the same line. In C#, we do a return and bring it down. It's just easier for me to read it this way. Sorry. All right. Else if the item location is oh goodness, is side pocket. Oh damn. I'm running out of steam apparently. If it is side pocket, then this one isn't an array. We're going to set it equal to the item. And then finally, otherwise, it's going in the main compartment. Else, item, location. All right, so now we have written a method that says, according to where the location of the item is, we're going to push it into the backpack. Yeah, side pocket's not an array. Otherwise, we would have pushed. All right. I'm sorry this is like not more spellbinding stuff. It's pretty kind of dry work. All right. So next thing, add a backpack method assigns a location if the location was null. So we're going to do that. Well, we got to set up a null situation. Right, so we've got an item. It's going to be a notebook. But then we're going to tell it null. And then we're going to create our new backpack. Gosh, really get it. And then we're going to my backpack, add the backpack. And the item. All right, so now that we created an item with a null location, we created a backpack and pushed that item into the backpack. We want to make sure that it puts this into the main compartment. Select my backpack. Oh, goodness. Mm. If it doesn't tell us where it wants it, we're just going to throw it into the main part of the backpack. Location of item is required. So that seems like we need to go back to our item code and find out what is going on. We need to add if it's not null, because null is location. You know, that's a value. So we're saying if it didn't input anything and the location does not equal null, then we're going to throw that error. But if they give us a null location, we want to assign it to the main compartment. So let's see if that fixed it. Expected null to equal main compartment. Okay. On 52. Sorry, I just saw you wasn't watching for a second. All right, so let's look at item. We've got our name, but doesn't have a name. We're going to throw the error. Got location. There's no location. And if the location is not null, then we throw an error. Let's check what our backpack says. If item location is front pocket, then put it in the front pocket. Else, if item location is side pocket, do that. Else, item location. I forgot to set the item location as main compartment if it wasn't one of these things. So if it's not front pocket and it's not side pocket, it's main compartment. And that was the problem. Because this was still leaving the location as null. All right. We have a few more. Let's see. We've got 2 more methods to write this way. I just got done with being. All right. Add a backpack is working. Now we want to test find item and array method, and we want it to return the index of an item when it finds it. So we want to say, look for this, and then tell me where it's at. Return the index. We're going to need our new item. Have it. And then we've got a new backpack. The nice thing about it being so repetitive is it gives you a chance to like really like get in there with what's happening. The like routine of it. Item to the backpack. And we want to check this array, which is everything that is in the main compartment of my backpack. So this is just assigning a separate variable to one section of it so that we can we expect that my backpack find item in array item array will equal we want it to equal 0. Now, you might be asking yourself, how the heck do I know what find item in array is supposed to do to test against it? And how you're supposed to know that is based on the specs that they give you. So like in your work, it will say we need a method that will find an item. It needs to take in 2 parameters and this, that, and the other. So that is where this comes from. But obviously, Since we haven't written it yet and there's nothing there, it's failing. There is no find item in array. I mean, there is, but there's no code in it to make it do anything. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to find an item in an array? If the array, remember this handy one, includes the item, then we want it to return array index of the item. Now it passes. Ooh, for in loop is a good idea, but yeah, contains, includes is if you could write it in a loop, but it would essentially do the same thing that this method already does. Of course, I made it look easy. I'm looking at the answers, Rich. I already did all this work before. And I'm still messing it up all over the place. All right. So next, if it's not found, we want it to return a -1. And so now this test is not going to have that thing in it. So, you know what? Just that's what I want to do. So we've got our item, we've got our backpack, but this time we are not putting anything in it. And if we try to find this item in the array, this time instead of returning index of 0 of the item, we want it to return a -1 because there's nothing in there. But it's undefined. Oh, why? Because we didn't put an else in here. We have an if, it's there, but we didn't have what happens if it's not there. So if it's not there, we have else -1. And that should make this test pass. And yay, it did.